Hello, and welcome to another episode of Smells Like Identity Hygiene, the podcast that's all about identity security, identity hygiene, and everything related to managing your identities in your organization. Today, we have David Morimano, or DJ for short. DJ is the field CTO for North America at Xalient. Welcome, David.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thank you.
So DJ, let's start with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your career, and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. I'll try to keep it brief. Like you had mentioned, I'm currently the field CTO for Xalient in North America. I've been in this field for more than 20 years. Kind of started literally right as I was leaving home and jumping into the into the marketplace, and started doing satellite stuff and helping with some support stuff with some restaurants, and made my way all the way up to helping run a small computer business in a small town in Indiana, all the way through, working with manufacturers. I've been an architect, an engineer, an implementer of kind of all things identity security related for petroleum companies, different kinds of energy companies, for healthcare companies, kind of all the above. And being that I had kind of a diverse background of different verticals, kind of jumped into consulting, and that's when I joined a company called Integral Partners, who about 4 or 5 years later was acquired by Xalient, where I am now.
Awesome. Yeah, your vast experience from we'll say humble beginnings to now kind of field CTO, and just your experience with all size industries, really, right? From very, very small, like you said, the computer shop, to now these large enterprises. It's one of the reasons why I was so eager to have you on the podcast, right? You kind of have this view of the world that isn't just about how the enterprises work, but also how like all sizes of organizations. But let's talk about large enterprises. I think most of our audience lives in that world. These large, complex enterprises that you and I both kind of work with. What do you think is the hardest part of keeping identity simple at such a large scale?
Yeah, so there's not, in my opinion, there's not one answer to that. There's many things that add to the complexity, to the structure of large enterprises, and when we look at identity in particular, and just to kind of level set where some of my answers are coming from. When we talk about identity and we talk about identity management, and I go into these organizations, these large enterprises, I'm kind of coming from the angle of building a strategy, building an approach, kind of getting them to a level of maturity that they need to be. When I kind of analyze, where is it that they need to go and where they are, and we look at identity kind of as that digital representation of not only the workforce within the organization, but suppliers as well as devices. The term identity could kind of bridge into multiple different populations. So with all that kind of in mind, I think that we still struggle with the basics. We still struggle with not knowing what is all out there, not knowing all the types of identities, not knowing all the types of entitlements and the access. We still struggle with, especially in this era of cloud providers and SaaS providers, what are all even our applications? A lot of us even struggle with the application inventory and who owns what, who's responsible, what applications do we even have? And then if we could magically solve for that, we still struggle with, what's truly the authoritative source for the data that drives my identities? Do we have multiple HR sources? Do we have an HR source and a source for contractors? Do we have a source for suppliers? And so there's all these complex, let's just call pockets of identity data, and all these areas where identities and devices and applications could live, that holistically these large organizations don't really have a good handle over 100% of the way. And then one thing that it's not unique to large enterprises, but it's very prevalent. Is with all that set aside, we have teams, we have orgs and structures that are really built in silos. And so if we could solve the technical issues and we could solve the data issues, if we could solve all that, at the end of the day, identity still affects people's workflows, work processes. It affects individuals directly and users. And to try to bring everyone to the table and determine, what that looks like and what the best approach is, we got to break down some silos between teams and what the outcome and the benefit for one team may not be the outcome and the benefit for another. The impact for one may not be the impact for another. So, to kind of put a bow on that, it's such a multifaceted question, even though it sounds like a simple question to ask. And I will tell you, having worked in many different organizations, and I say every organization is just as unique as the people in the organization, that you can't do this cookie cutter approach when it comes to that strategy and say, hey, it worked for my competitor or it worked for this other company. Therefore, that exact approach as it sets is going to work for me. There's going to be all of these nuances. So I'll kind of leave it there, because I could spend a whole session on just what it takes to kind of build a strategy around your people and your org and your data before you even take any actions to solve any of these issues.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said, where even the definition of that word identity, right? There's so much confusion. Are we talking about the human? Are we talking about the account that's tied to the human? Are we talking about the application that's using the access token that's accessing some resource? Are we talking about the token itself? Are we talking about the API key?
Absolutely.
Are we talking about the AI agent, right? Are we talking, what exactly is the identity? And then what do you have to protect, right? Is a token just an entitlement, or is it a full-fledged identity, right? And depending on who you ask, you'll get different opinions about what exactly it is. And yet we're trying to solve this in a really complex organization, like you said, where I've seen where organization will hire an entire team that came from another organization to implement what they did there, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't work the same. They have to adjust for that organization because of, even within the same industry, right?
Yeah.
In some instances.
And even if you were going to try to take a very structured approach, and I've seen organizations try this, where they're like, all right, we're going to go out to NIST publication XYZ, or we're going to go out to document ABC, and these are the best practices, and therefore we will do these things, right? Even going at it from that angle, where you would assume it's pretty structured. We're going to do X because it's very clear we need to do X. That's the best practice. Keep in mind, I think a lot of those are good. They're good to strive for. I think they give you a good kind of tunnel to kind of vision, put a vision through. But just because something is a best practice or a best approach, it doesn't always mean it's a best fit for your organization. Now, the outcomes of those, should be something that we incorporate, but the way and the approach that is described, or, just do X, so we need to do X, it may not be. You may need to do A, B, C, and 1, 2, 3 to get the outcome of X. So, leaders and organizations very much struggle to tell the story of the effort and what it needs to take to get to that result. I read a lot of stuff from like Gartner and Kiplinger-Cole and Forrester, and again, it's good data, it's good information. I'm not trying to knock it or set it aside at any level, but you have to look at that as, all right, what's the value of doing that thing? Now, how can I attempt to do that thing? Not just take it at face value. And what's the narrative that I'm selling of that value? And that's part of it, right? You asked about the struggle around managing identity and getting there. All that is kind of wrapped around this narrative of, what is in it for our organization? What is it going to take for our organization? Who needs to be involved? What's the impact? What's the lift? What's the resources? And if you can't have that conversation at the start of the building of your strategy and incorporate those as key foundational mechanisms and discussions in your strategy, you're probably not going to get the outcome that you expected, or at least to the degree that you see success being.
Yeah, it's almost like all of those resources, whether it's the Gartner, the Forrester, just research, books, everything else. Those are just the ingredients to ultimately the cake, right? You can't
Absolutely.
just say,
Yeah.
all right, I have sugar, so I have cake, or I have the frosting and I have cake, or at least I baked the cake, but I haven't put it all together with the decoration and everything. You kind of need all those things. Those are all critical, right? All really, really important. But you're not going to have a cake until you actually make a cake. You only have
Yes.
ingredients, and then you actually ultimately have to bake the cake. So when you walk into an environment, let's say you're working with a large enterprise, and you walk in and they want to either, maybe they have a really immature IAM program, or one that is fairly mature, but they know they need work, right? They know they need to improve. Where do you even start? I know you said that you like to go in with the strategy, but where do you start, and where do you find the biggest blockers are to kind of get started?
Yeah. So my goal when I step in is to at least at a bare minimum get kind of the walls and the moving ingredients or the moving pieces to build that strategy. So I go in and I'm not laying down the strategy for the organization day one. I think what's the best approach and what really works for me is I go into the organization and I simply want to learn a little bit more about what's that organization's vision, what's their goal, what's the direction that they'd like to head. And then we kind of start to go a little bit deeper, layer by layer. So who's involved in building that vision? Let's talk to those people. Let's talk about what their objectives are. And then we start to go down deeper and say, all right, so this is kind of built on your feelings around a framework or an approach or your experience in the past. So let's talk about that. And so as we start to have these discussions, typically at kind of that leadership level, what it ends up leading to is we're building now this at a minimum this direction that we need to move the organization. And now that we know the direction that we're moving, and we now have the flag at the end that we're trying to strive to shoot for, aim for, let's kind of go back and see where we are today in reality. Let's talk to the people that have the hands on keyboard, the boots on the ground. Let's talk to the people that are taking the tickets. Let's talk to the people. Let's talk to those that are requesting the access. Let's have conversations with HR and say, what are your struggles? And kind of give them kind of almost like a therapy session to let them say, here's the problems I have with how it is today. And through that, a lot of times they'll tell you what they think could be done better. And then we kind of go a little bit more in a kind of an evidence-based approach. All right. So now we kind of know all the things that people are grumbling and saying could be better. We now know the vision and the direction that the leadership wants to go. In the middle there is some form of reality and something that's obtainable. And so then we'll, ideally we would love to perform some sort of like artifact gathering and reviewing of your data sources, whether it's Active Directory or Universal Directory or your HR data, and let's see what all those tools are and all those bits are that you actually have at your disposal. And through that, now we can start to see a picture of what that gap really is. Do you not have the right technology in place? Do you not have the right process in place? Maybe you don't have the right people and skills in place, or maybe it's a mixture of some of those or all of those. And so now what I do is take all of that information and build what I refer to as kind of an actionable blueprint. And it starts with where you really are, what you really have, and it adds on to that where you need to go, why you need to go there, the justification of all of that. And that justification is built on the evidence and everything that we found and all the influencing factors of individuals. And then we actually tell you, okay, you're in this realm, a maturity level of 1, for an example, and perfect would be a 5, but you're not going to get to a 5. We know what you have. We know kind of where we need to go. Going for a 5 is going to be a waste of resources, time, and effort. But if we can get you to a 3, here's what you're actually going to get. And this is actually obtainable. And it's obtainable with the tools you have, or maybe you need to add another tool in, or maybe you need to shift a team. So all of these things come together, and we build an actionable blueprint, an actionable roadmap. And we build it in a way that, as the tide rises, it rises all ships, right? So, we go and know that, hey, in this area, we're going to move to a 3, but that allows us to maybe move another area where we're a 2 to a 4, and another area that's a 1 to a 3. And everything is interconnected. So kind of the moving pieces of this is, again, all the above that I just mentioned, but we also need to know where some convergence needs to happen with either technology or teams or people or conversations. So we talk about impact. We really want to make sure that it's understood what teams need to be at the table, what the impact needs to be. And then we need to ensure that the direction that we're going and all of this package fits the culture of the organization. Because I think that's something that a lot of people miss in their strategies. Am I going to try to change the culture of people and the culture of my organization with this big sweeping effort? If so, maybe that's justified, but maybe it's not. Maybe we need to rethink our approach so we can obtain and retain that culture because it's valuable to us. So, there's a lot of things there. I'd be happy to kind of dive into those, but it's a multifaceted approach for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I think for the longest time, people thought about the solution before they thought about the strategy, right? You talk a lot about the strategy, and people think, I need to protect my privileged accounts. I need to go buy a PAM solution. Oh, I need an IGA. Let me go buy an IGA. Well, I need a CMDB. Let me go buy a CMDB. Or I need this. Let me go hire, a bunch of consultants that solve this X problem. But you're kind of thinking about each piece as kind of an island when it's all related. It's all part of that whole ecosystem, the identity ecosystem. Absolutely. And the reality is today, when we're talking about identity security, we're talking about security. Right.
Exactly.
It's not, it's interesting. So I'll look at a breach report or some recent breach and they don't know yet what the source was. Right. It's like, it hasn't been reported what the source was. And in the back of my head is, it was probably identity related. Right. I mean, 88% of all breaches are identity related right now. So it probably was related to some phishing attack or something related to a compromised identity. But that approach of going in and say, well, let's take a step back, right? Let's look at what problem you're trying to solve, which, it does seem to be, and maybe this is a problem with the fact that, we talk to technology people, right? We're not selling refrigerators, right? We're not selling vacuum cleaners. We're not selling cars. Yeah. We're selling to technology people, and technology people always think about the implementation more than the strategy, right? I'm sure you've seen this too, where someone will tell you some problem they're trying to solve, but they're not asking you how to solve the problem. They're asking you about the solution. And we're like, wait, what exactly are you trying to solve? Tell me the problem you're trying to solve first, and then I'll give you my opinion on what the solution would be, versus you coming to me and saying, I need a product that does X, or I need a product that does Y. Well, what is the actual problem you're trying to solve? Do you find that kind of getting people, especially on the business side, right, or the senior leadership, having them understand the problem that you're going in to solve, is that a challenge or one of the challenges?
So I kind of encounter this quite a bit, and I kind of refer to it as kind of a mindset of implementation over implication. And there's implications of our decisions that we make, whether that is to implement something or to change something. And one of the things that is some of the biggest pushback I get, especially from the business, is, what's the implication of these changes? How is it going to affect me? Is it going to make my day harder? Is it going to make things, more difficult? Like, I get the value most of the time. I think a lot of people underestimate the business when it comes to the value. They're like, we got to sell the value, and we got to sell that we're reducing risk, and we got to sell this and sell that. In my experience, most of the time, the business gets that. Like, they may not get it to the depth or the understanding that, the security team or the technology team gets it, but they get that. The part that we need to do to bridge that conversation is not lose that in translation, but also say, here's what this decision, here's what this implication is going to be for you. Here, and in some cases, it could even be a positive. Here's how it's going to make your day better. Here's how it's going to make it so the business can move faster. Here's how it's going to be that you can sell more widgets or produce more widgets. Because, at this day and age, for the most part, we're past this, just tell them we're reducing risk and, tell them, it's making them safer. I believe that most of the business gets that at this point. So we have to elevate our conversation. We have to build that bridge. So it is very much a challenge, but it's not a challenge necessarily in just talking to the business, but I have that same challenge talking to the technical folks about how to talk to the business and get us all on the same page, or at least in the same realm of the same book. Now, that being said, running to technology is a lot of times what the technical side likes to do. It's like, here's this new tool, here's this new thing, or I just had this breach and I've got to close this Band-Aid. So, I'm going to buy this PAM tool or buy this thing. And when I come in a lot of times and we do take that step back, we realize that you typically have most of the time the technology in the environment you need, sometimes too much. And we have to kind of right size it, rescale it, bring things down to reality. And to your point about, the thing that we're after, the thing that we're trying to move towards, the thing that we're trying to accomplish, that's when now we've looked at our policy, we looked at our procedure, we looked at our culture, we've got this strategy in place of where we need to go. All right, now we may need to add a new bit of technology to enforce that, make that capable, let that be the mechanism which drives some of the change. Because, to be honest, we're not going to be able to do this without technology. But technology shouldn't be the first thing we speak on, and technology shouldn't be what we build the strategy around. We should build the strategy, the approach, the objectives, and say, how can we get this done with the right technology, with the right tool, not the other way around.
So speaking of the technologies in this kind of a identity security ecosystem, obviously right now there's a number of them, whether we're talking about an IGA, a PAM solution, arguably a CMDB, HR. What are some of the other technologies that you feel that fit into that ecosystem that maybe people aren't thinking about, but when you go into an organization, you're like, actually, this thing that you have off over here, this should fall into this bucket of identity security?
Yeah, and I think, so there's two categories. There's those things that I think fall into that bucket, but then there are things outside of that bucket that I think leak over into that bucket. And I think you could probably say the reverse, right? The things that neatly fit in that bucket actually leak out into other things. And if you look at what is probably more traditional, your PAM or your IGA, your access management, categories, we're seeing kind of this evolution of need of new functions where we're seeing things like KIM or cloud infrastructure entitlement management that fits in that bucket. The one that I don't hear enough about, but I think we really should be talking more about is ITDR, identity threat detection and response, getting that visibility and awareness of things that are out there. But then there's like a modernization effort going on right now where people are looking for these capabilities in more of a modern way. Modern PAM, right? Instead of vaulting passwords and rotating credentials, let's get rid of the account. Let's get rid of the credential and let's do a just-in-time CSP approach where we're applying permissions more ephemeral. And we look at the IGA and its evolvement and its modernization of looking at things that aren't just human and beyond that. We're moving into an era where we're like, all right, let's admit RBAC, role-based access controls, really never gave us what we wanted. And it's a huge lift for very little value. So, what about ABAC and PBAC and CBAC? What are these new things? So there's all this new flux in taking what's in that bucket and kind of evolving it. And then we have things outside of that, like SASE here. We've got some secure networking approaches. We've got things like DLP and data loss protection, and we've got all these things around, application security posture management and data security posture management, identity security posture management. They don't all fit just in that bucket, but they start to gather a vision of the organization and its posture and its status, and uses what's in that bucket to give you that better picture. And like SASE and securing things at the edge and that connectivity, like the connectivity piece is still going to be there. Yeah, things are in the cloud and things are provided by different service providers, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, my identity is going to float out there and float back and float around all through the connectivity channel. Let's make sure that's secure. So, I mean, the lack of better kind of visuals is, or lack of having a better visual is it really is this interwoven fabric. Like we used to talk about the identity fabric, and really it's kind of this identity control plane now. And how do you ensure that you have across the control plane, which has four key functions? It's the trust fabric, it's the trust access fabric, it's literally the access fabric, and then it's the orchestration fabric, layer. Then we get down to the actual automation side of things. So how do all these things function and work? And you're going to realize there's not one tool that can do it all. There's not one approach that can do it all. And we kind of have to have this combination of things. But in my opinion, just to kind of wrap all of that, visibility and awareness of what you have is still the biggest challenge of all of that. If I had all those tools and all those capabilities and all the ability to just lock it down, like, how do I know I'm locking everything down? How do I know I'm doing everything to the right level? That discovery of what's out there, unfortunately, especially in large enterprise, is a huge, huge gap.
It's interesting too, if you think about it. This has always been a problem in large enterprises, right? But the complexity of how the modern person works, how the modern organization works with SaaS applications and remote workers and all this. It's almost like that complexity has kind of moved down market, right? And it's moved to medium and even small organizations now have to think about, well, everyone's not showing up to a building and everyone logs in with their AD account and that's the only access they have, right? Even really small organizations now have to deal with the complexity of remote workers, SaaS applications, on-prem legacy applications, multiple accounts, and it's almost like that complexity has kind of bled down to the smaller organizations, right?
Yeah, it has, and I think probably even more so. You look at these small organizations that, and many times, are feeding into these larger organizations as either a supplier or another execution arm, and so now you look at these smaller organizations and they're, the larger organizations are saying, I'm going to hold you to my standards. You need to follow these things. Do you have a PAM tool? Do you have a CMDB? Do you have a ITSM? Do you have these things? Are you following these same things that, regulators are telling me I have to follow? Because now if something happens to your data, you might have access into my data. And now we've got this, like I said earlier, about kind of that fabric of capabilities and functions and structure. We're kind of doing the same thing with organizations. Like, not every organization is going to be necessarily interwoven with each other, but the breaches are getting larger and larger and larger because we're finding these hotbeds of data where, I can go after the little guy that's not doing everything and get into the big guy. Because there's a way in, so they're being forced to raise that. You'd be surprised. I should say probably the listeners would be surprised, but I think the average person who's not familiar with this industry would be very surprised how interconnected these organizations are. And obviously the move to the cloud and making everything, we're all kind of using, at the end of the day, similar backbones, whether it's AWS or GCP or Azure. We're all kind of building ourselves in a direction where there are these hot buttons that could bring a lot of things down and, cause a lot of issues. So, we all have a part to play, big, medium, or large, small, doesn't matter. We all have a place to kind of discuss and determine how we can elevate each other's capabilities. So to your point, it's not just that complexity has worked its way down. It's kind of almost the expectation that a small business will run like an enterprise.
And then, of course, there's AI, and I can't believe we've gone a full almost 30 minutes and not had a significant discussion around AI.
Yeah, I tried not to say it at the beginning.
So, of course, AI adds another. We have kind of a complex, fractured, difficult to manage environment when it came to human identities, and then machine identities became a thing, and then that added a layer of. Although you could argue machine identities have always been around, but let's say the focus was less on machine identities, right? It was mostly on human identities. Machine identities added a layer of complexity. Before we solved the human identity problem, now we were dealing with machine identities, and now before we even have a chance to deal with machine identities, we have AI and AI agents coming into the mix. This kind of hybrid identity between human and machine, you could argue. How does the industry, how do they grapple with these things? What are your customers asking you about? How do I properly manage these things that are kind of autonomous, but also machines?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple things. I would be one of those that would argue, machine identities have been around, forever. But the rate in which they're growing, the dependency on them, the fact that they're probably not behind lock and key anymore, they're exposed to different workloads. Like the evolution of them is really the issue. And then we've got this kind of influx, like you said, of like AI agents and this. When I talk to clients or I talk to those kind of out at conferences, it kind of still comes back to the basics of definitions, of understanding what is an HI, like what is a machine identity, what is a bot, what is an agent, like how should we look at these things? And I think we're still trying to provide solid definitions, and then at the same time, without some sort of solid definition in these organizations, and I'm not saying these definitions don't exist, I'm saying sometimes they're not adapted the same way within organizations. It's all right, now what do we do about it? Like, do we look at these as humans? Do we give them their own identity? Who's responsible? And I can tell you where things seem to be heading, which is the quick answer is yes, we treat these agents similar to a human, but not the same. Meaning we hold them to the same rigor and the same level of control, maybe even more so. We do attestation reviews of their access. We check with the legitimacy and the accountability of the owner of them. Who manages them? Do they have a direct report of a person who's going to be the final say? These are things that we need to build, and things and structures and frameworks that we're in the process of building. Because at the end of the day, what that agent does, somebody has to still be accountable for that. Somebody still has to sign off that agent has the access it needs and it's doing the right thing. So that's where we're seeing this modernization with IGA and a few other vendors where they're like, all right, we need to take this more seriously. We need to provide these capabilities. One thing I will add is where there's a positive to this, at least I think there's a positive to the influx of AI, is AI is really good at analyzing data. That is like what it shines at. And it can do so at such a pace that I think we're also entering an era where maybe we're able to get out of this kind of repeated reviewing of access, this repeated, does David have the access he needs this quarter? Go ask his manager. All right, what about next quarter? Go ask his manager. What about next quarter? Go ask his manager. And we see these attestation reviews. And I'm using this as one example. I think there's many examples we can bring up of this. But maybe we can finally analyze the data well enough in the combination of doing things like ITDR and others that are watching the activity and legitimacy of the tasks that these accesses are being used for, to finally say, all right, David's got the access he needs for this. let's stop asking about that. Let's actually ask about the outliers. Let's actually ask about the things that don't look normal. Let's get to the heart of why we should be asking this anyway, and right sizing. And this goes back to the comment I made earlier about like kind of role-based access not really giving the value that it was promised, obviously because of the lift and the effort and all these hygiene type exercises that go in that become static and stale the moment you're done with them. Is me and you may have the exact same title, the exact same role. We may even sit on the exact same team, but we may not do the same things. And we may not do them at the same level. So let's evaluate our access for what it is that we actually do and need to do, not what we theoretically should be bucketized to do. So that's where I think we're heading is, we're going to evolve PAM, we're going to evolve IGA, we're going to evolve these solutions to look at agents and these new categorizations of non-humans and put the right control and rigor around them. We're still developing policies and procedures on how to do that and what we should, including definitions of these things, but that's where we're heading. But at the same time, I don't want to lose sight that I think there's a lot of value add in this industry, because a lot of what we do in identity is kind of analyzing data, analyzing patterns, analyzing entitlements, and making justifications to whether it's correct or not correct, and I think AI could really help us with that. I think it's already starting to.
Wouldn't it be awesome if you want to take a positive view of the world, if you had this AI agent that not only was doing whatever it's supposed to do, but constantly, without you asking, checking, hey, do I have more access than I should have? And if I do, I'm going to go ahead and request that my access be removed because I'm a good citizen. And you could argue like AI's tendency to want to please you all the time. Oh, you're doing great. That's a great question. That maybe you could train it to do those things where it will proactively do the right thing, and more so than a human, right? Because a human's like, I'm too busy, I'm not going to bother with that, right? Maybe an AI agent can be trained to do that. I mean, again, a pessimistic view of the glass half empty view is, well, you could look at all the evidence of where AI agents, whether it's in a lab or in production, has done the wrong thing, not the right thing, because ultimately it is trained on human nature, right? It's trained on human data. Yeah. But if you really want to take the optimistic view of the world, it's this AI agent's going to run. It's going to be better than an employee because it's going to proactively review itself and say, no, I have too much access, remove it, or just I'm going to go and remove it myself. But the reality is, it will ultimately, I think, need that human ownership, right? That human oversight.
Yeah, I think like everything I just said, I think that's the direction I think it's going to head. I think we're going to see positive when it comes to reviewing humans and the things that we kind of get stuck in, the ruts that we get stuck in. I think AI is going to finally allow us to kind of lift out of that. But to your point, I think ultimately, I don't think we've quite deemed what these people are, but, AI custodians, watchers on the wall, whatever they may be, there has to be oversight. And I think the overall equation will lighten in the long run, where we have AI doing a lot of this, just the busy work, the analytic work, the structured work that, frankly, we hire like a team of 10 admins to do today, when it's just simple, basic stuff that an AI could do. But you still need that oversight. You still need those balances and checks. I mean, there's reasons why auditors check the work that humans do, and it's because we make mistakes. I'm under no impression that AI does not make mistakes. I would even argue that AI makes mistakes faster, but the positive in my mind is AI will make mistakes hopefully consistently. So then you can point to these fixes and see these issues a little bit cleaner and easier, but they will be there. So that's a whole nother era. So I talk to people and they're like, AI is going to take my job and AI is going to do, I think AI is going to change your jobs, but I don't think it's going to take your job. I think you're going to see, not in the cyberspace, at least. I see you're probably going to elevate your skills and move over and be these custodians and these watchers on the walls and try to find the best uses for AI.
It's funny. I actually have a GPT podcast producer, right? One that I created that has all past episodes. So Matt, who's on the line, don't worry, I'm not replacing you. We still need a real human producer. But what I do with that is when I have a guest, I'll take the guest's LinkedIn and I'll say, okay, draft some questions for me for this guest based on their experience and what I should be asking. And even for you, it just started making up stuff. Like you were, I forget what exactly it said, but something that you spoke about that you're really adamant about something. And I was like, all right, give me the reference to that. Show me where he specifically said that. I was like, oh, well, he didn't specifically say that. I was like, well, why are you telling me that? Right.
Yeah, it alludes
it's still,
to a lot.
yeah. And that desire to please me, again, that AI's desire to please me with trying to find something, even if it just has to make it up, right? Is where I think you still need that for now. Maybe we'll get to a point where the hallucinations will be something that we think about. Oh, remember when AI used to make stuff up? Maybe we'll get to that point. Doesn't seem that way, but maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
But if you had to look at,
I don't think we'll get that far, but I do think it will get better for sure.
Yeah. But if you had to, and this is with everything going on these days, this is such an unfair question. But if you had to guess, you walk into a large enterprise 5 years from now, right? What are you going to see in that large enterprise that's significantly different than what you would see today when you walk into a large enterprise from an identity security perspective, of course?
I think right now, the answer, if I walked into an enterprise today, it very much is, we don't know what we don't know, right? So we don't know, where all of our identities are. We don't know where all of our data is going, or we don't know all of our applications, or we don't know all of our privileged accounts. So like, that's kind of the theme. Like, there's more things. Like, obviously, I'm pinpointing it to probably what would be a common thread being asked. But if I go 5 years from now, I don't think that's going to change. I just think it's going to kind of be in a different perspective. And what I mean by that is, how can I validate that, David did this and this bot didn't? How can I validate that David's actually doing his job? He doesn't just have a bot doing his job. How can I validate that we have this application and we own this application, and frankly, this application isn't just a made-up application that someone spun up and sold to us because they sold it to some person who had the ability to sign off on checks, right? So I think it's the we don't know what we don't know, but it's the we can't justify what we can't justify, and we can't validate what we can't validate. So these themes, I think, are still going to be there, but in 5 years, it's going to be different levels of questioning, because we're going to have this, and I think what we're doing with AI in general in the basis realm is good, but one of the side effects is we're kind of breaking down trust. Can we really trust the source? And you kind of hit on this with it making up and wanting to please. Like, can I trust that image is AI or not? Or can I trust that this report is really written by you or not? And did you really do your tickets, or did an AI do your tickets? Like, there's this, that's going to be something that we're not quite asking yet, but I see the makings of it, that I'm going to walk into a boardroom and leadership is going to basically tell me and say, all right, I need to justify my team, but I don't know what they're doing, and I don't know what AI is doing. And now it's run rampant in my org, and I can't tell the difference. I think that's going to be a big differentiator that kind of isn't there today.
Awesome. So, DJ, we've actually reached the part of the podcast where now we ask a question that's completely unrelated to what you do, your full-time job, not related to technology at all or security. I guess the first question is, are you into horror movies at all? Because it's October, Halloween, so I have a horror movie-related question. You've seen horror movies.
I've seen them. They're not my favorite genre, but I have seen them.
Myself, also me, I'm not a big fan of horror movies, but I have seen a few. So the question is, if you had to pick a horror movie to be in, which horror movie character, like, the monster, the bad guy, the one trying to kill you, do you think you could get away from? You could escape? And why?
Which one could I, and why?
Yeah.
I would probably say Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street movies, because to me that's all about. And again, I've only seen a couple of them, so I'm sure there's like a diehard fan out there that I'm going to make mad. But to me, it feels like that's all kind of in the mind, right? And if I think I could maybe overpower or overcome something of the mind more than I probably could something physical. Like if I was in like the real Friday the 13th movies where I think that's Jason with the knife, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who just can't die. He's
and the
actually
husky
after
mask.
you and shoot him. Yeah. Like you probably, I mean, no matter how much you try, I don't think I'm going to get away. He's going to keep coming. Mm-hmm. Where I think the Nightmare on Elm Street ones, being in the dreams and in the mind, like that seems like something you could maybe regulate and like therapy your way out of. Who knows? But again, I'm sure there's diehard fans, and the fact I even switched those two movies up at the very beginning of my answer is probably going to make someone upset. But
Nightmare on Elm Street is the movie that you think you could get away from because it's all in the dreams.
Yes. Yeah.
I kind of said the same thing, only because maybe my dreams are so demented that it would scare him more than he would scare me. But kind of the same effect.
Yeah, but put him in a few boardrooms with some CISOs, and he might change his mind.
Yeah, look at my mortgage and my tax bill. The funny thing is with Friday the 13th, someone in the office here, because I've been asking. Usually, when I have the question, I'll ask people in the office. And someone said Friday the 13th would be the one because it always happens in like some camping scene. And she said I would never go camping. So I would never put myself in a situation where he'd be able to come after me. Because I don't think there's been one where he's like, he runs in the middle of New York City killing people, right? It's always some cabin somewhere off in the woods, right? It's like avoid cabins and you could avoid him, right? And you could get away.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I've only seen one or two of those, and I spend a lot of time outdoors and camping, and so I think I put myself in that scenario by accident.
so definitely that's not the movie for you.
That's not the one.
DJ, this was phenomenal. Exactly what I expected. Of course, you can come back anytime. This was great, and thank you so much for being on.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Smells Like Identity Hygiene. Smells Like Identity Hygiene is a production of Sphere Technology Solutions, and our producer is Matthew Klink. Until next time.